It's week 11 of 2022. I'm Smita Nair. This is your weekly fix. Yogi Adityanath, the first Uttar Pradesh Chief Minister to retain power after completing a full 5-year term, is expected to be sworn in sometime early next week. Today, we look at the Akhilesh Yadav-led Samajwadi Party's failure to dislodge the BJP, despite the SP garnering its best ever vote share of 32%. Since the 1990s, the Mandal-Kamandal binary, as it's referred to, has been key to the politics of Uttar Pradesh and Bihar. For those unfamiliar with the terms, Mandal here refers to the consolidation of backward castes. It was the Mandal Commission's report that recommended 27% reservations in government jobs for other backward classes. Kamandal means Hindutva politics. It is important to note that while Mandir and not Mandal has been the BJP's main calling card and the upper castes its mainstay, the party's strategy to stitch together a coalition of its traditional vote bank of upper caste with non-dominant OBCs goes back to the mid-late 90s. The promotion of Kalyan Singh in Uttar Pradesh and Uma Bharti in Madhya Pradesh, both backward caste leaders who became chief ministers of their respective states, are a case in point. OBCs comprise an estimated 43 to 45% of the population in Uttar Pradesh. It was the 2017 election that saw the BJP consolidate the non-Yadav OBC votes. Mandal parties like the Samajwadi Party were increasingly seen as being in the stranglehold of the Yadavs, the dominant OBC. But these elections saw Akhilesh Yadav's Samajwadi Party stitch together a formidable strategic alliance, including with parties representing the aspirations of non-Yadav OBCs like Om Prakash Rajbhar's SBSP and Mahandal led by Keshav Dev Maurya. There was little doubt that non-Yadav backward caste voters would be key to who wins these elections. So, how did the BJP retain support of its backward caste voters? This has happened despite upper caste continuing to find disproportionate representation in the legislature and cornering of key portfolios in the BJP government. Has the BJP's reinforcing of the Hindu political identity helped its cause with backward caste voters? Have the Mandal parties been effectively marginalized? Since Narendra Modi's victory in 2014, we've been hearing analysts talk about Mandal parties being reduced to footnotes. Is that actually happening? Let's ask Professor Nilanjan Sarkar from the Center for Policy Research and Sumit Pandey, senior journalist. Sumit has reported on Uttar Pradesh politics for more than 2 decades. Thanks to the both of you for making the time to speak to us. Sumit, straight away, can we say these elections show that the Mandal parties are no longer the dominant and preferred vehicle of backward caste assertion?
I personally feel that BJP as a political party has been the biggest beneficiary of the Mandal-Kamandal disruption in the Indian politics in 1989 and 90. If you look at, the politics of the heartland states from Bihar to Madhya Pradesh to Uttar Pradesh to Rajasthan to Jharkhand to Maharashtra, BJP has been able to mobilize a large section of backward communities in every state, except for Yadavs. Now, the issue was that Yadavs, being the numerically most dominant community and socially and economically dominant community, they were able to create a social coalitions in the past in both Bihar and UP, wherein they were able to breach the 30% mark or the percentage mark, voter mark in both the states. And in a multi-party, in a multi-cornered contest, a 30-31% vote was enough for Samajwadi Party in UP, for RJD in Bihar, and at one point in time for even BSP to get a clear majority. Remember that Akhilesh Yadav, when he won his majority in 2012, had less than 30% votes.
Right.
BSP had only 30% votes and 204 seats in 2007. What BJP has done is that it has expanded this umbrella to create a larger and a much bigger social coalition. On one hand, they have created a larger circle of the Hindu nationalism, wherein they are co-opting all the Hindu communities. Within that larger circle is another concentric circle, smaller one, wherein they have created another mobilization or a polarization wherein the minor OBCs, which have not been able to benefit as much as the Yadavs in UP, they have been mobilized under this umbrella. And there is another circle within that, and that of the Dalits, wherein they have been able to mobilize a large section of the non-Jata Dalits. So it's three sort of concentric rings, and they have been working on it for a very, very long time. Post 2014, with Modi coming to power and BJP underscoring its backward credentials in the heartland politics, they have been able to execute it very, very effectively than other parties. They've taken the bar up to 40-45% in both heartland states, whereby you can't win an election and as SP and BSP used to do with 30 or 31% polls. Samajwadi Party has got a large section of the backward votes this time around. It's not that they haven't got it. But what BJP has been doing successfully is that not only have they got a large section of the OBC, but they have also retained a section of the Dalit votes, which the BSP was not able to carry this time around because of Mayawati not being very, very aggressive and active in the electoral politics in 2020.
Professor Sarkar?
So one of the things that I've been telling everybody is that when you look at the vote shares and you actually even do a phase-wise analysis, a constituency-wise analysis, you see that the Samajwadi Party actually ended up doing everything that it said it would do. It was able to get consolidation among the social communities that it said it would. In areas where the BJP was weak and had more anti-incumbency, where there had been BSP vote share, the Samajwadi Party was able to pull ahead, particularly in a number of the constituencies in the last two phases. But even when we put all of that together, we're looking at 36, 35, 36, 37% vote share. And that's something we knew. Going into the election, I think a lot of us who work with numbers said, even if the Samajwadi Party gets everything that it wants, we're talking about a vote share around there. The rest of the vote share would have to come from people who were either leaving the BJP or switching from the BJP to the Samajwadi Party, right?
Right.
Now, as we now know, the BJP not only, continued its vote share from 2017, but actually improved on it slightly. A lot of that has to do with the fact that the BSP crumbled. So the question for any such party like the Samajwadi Party, which was actually able to get all the consolidations that it intended to, is that can you ever reach a high enough vote share percentage against a party like the BJP, which appeals more broadly? It starts off with a much larger social coalition.
Right.
So the way that I like to sort of explain this to people is to say, okay, when we think about communities that we talk a lot about in UP, talk about the Muslim community, opposition side, Muslim community, the Jata community, scheduled castes more generally. We talk about the Jats. We talk about the Yadavs, right? Maximum, we're talking about 50-55% of the population. And that's being split between two parties. The rest of the population is plausibly being targeted more by the BJP. So it starts off with a much larger social coalition. So what this election showed us is that the narrow targeting of communities, trying to get consolidation of communities, fails when you're up against a party that has a certain baseline vote share that is above a certain value simply because it's of its larger social coalition. Right? And I think I'm certainly not the only analyst to have noticed that. I would just add one or two very small things here. I would say, okay, does that mean no new party can break in or no regional party can break in? We've seen, in fact, the success of the TMC, of the Aam Aadmi Party. These are parties that do not start, they're not mandal parties, right? They do not start with an identity base. They are more universalistic in nature.
Right.
So it isn't that they're regional, it is actually the strategy that seems to be problematic. Now, there's a question about, does this mean that the shape of lower OBC assertion or OBC assertion in Indian politics has changed? So I would say yes. And the way to sort of think about this is that it was always the merging of two reasons to vote somebody's caste. So the first was a dignity-based assertion, right? That I feel for my identity. I don't want my identity to be impugned, right?
Hmm.
The second logic was a political economy logic, that it is known that the bureaucrats or local politicians will use underlying biases to distribute benefits when these local politicians and local bureaucrats have a lot of power to do so. And so it became understood that if I vote for somebody of my caste community or religious community and have local bureaucrats from that community, that I can disproportionately reap benefits.
Right. And it is this patronage network you say the BJP has done away with or is seen as having done away with.
Fast forward to the last few years, and we see much more in direct benefit transfers, basically benefits coming from the top directly into people's bank accounts.
Right.
A number of other mechanisms that actually bypass state bureaucracies, right? Even a party like the Aam Aadmi Party, which was successful this time, started its Delhi model in a state in which it doesn't have control over its bureaucracy. It actually uses its political party machinery to distribute everyone, right? So all of this has sort of cut off the political economy angle of caste, right? The sort of centralizing of welfare distribution means the key role that caste intermediaries used to play in distribution no longer applies the way that it used to. And therefore, today you can have a situation in which my powerful local caste leader switches parties, but I am still willing to vote for the BJP and Modi because I have received benefits from the center, right? And that sort of core connection between local caste intermediaries and economic delivery has fundamentally been broken over the last several years.
Okay. Sumit, a factor that one would have thought would be key this election would be the BJP's decision to allocate 10% reservation to the economically weaker sections among the upper castes and the subsequent demand that it spurred, led by the Mandal parties, that a caste census be undertaken which will lay bare the truth of representation and the continued marginalization of certain communities.
Why I think this entire mobilization failed on the part of the Samajwadi Party was that though they were talking about caste census, but they were not able to break it down and explain to the OBCs that how tangibly it's going to be beneficial to them. So the entire caste census debate emanates from the fact that you now have a EWS quota for the economically weaker sections, which breaches the 49% benchmark.
Right.
Set in the Indira Sahni case as far as reservations in government jobs and education institutions are concerned. Now, and all these years, the OBC quota is based on adequate representation and not proportional representation, because the population of the OBCs in the country has not been enumerated after 1931, and it is basically based on non-empirical evidence that OBC population, as Mandal Commission said, was 54%, or half of that is 27%.
Right.
Now, the entire debate within the OBC community is that if the 49% benchmark has been breached for the upper caste or the EWS, then what is stopping the governments from providing us, the backward bloc, representation according to our numerical strength? And how do you get to know the numerical strength? You hold the caste census. I think this particular aspect of holding caste census to expand the OBC quota pie for the backward classes and how it's going to benefit them was not being effectively explained to the backwards. The second is that OBCs did look at Samajwadi Party very, very closely, but I think they were not convinced. That sort of trust was still lacking within the OBC bloc between the Yadavs and the minor OBCs, though a section of them did help Samajwadi Party. Please remember that numerically they may not have got seats, but Samajwadi Party getting 35% vote share is the largest vote share, highest vote share, which SP or Janata Dal has never got in the past in UP.
Yes.
In terms of vote share, it's a very good performance. Mulayam Singh Yadav has never got 35%. 29 point some percent was the best that he could manage in 2012. So they have expanded that umbrella. They have brought in a lot of people under that umbrella, but it wasn't good enough to beat the BJP this time around. And BJP was very clearly benefited by a large section of the Dalits moving over to help the BJP. Though I personally feel, and as I could see it on the ground, that if BJP benefited, say, in 80 out of 100 seats, where Dalits probably made the difference and did not vote for BSP and shifted their vote, then there were also constituencies where Dalits probably thought that the Samajwadi Party local candidate was strong enough to provide them protection in absence of BSP not looking strong enough, then they even voted for Samajwadi Party.
Okay. And what, to your mind, Professor Sarkar, has been a key factor in the BJP co-opting the Mandal space effectively?
Yes, I think when we think about talking about co-optation of the Mandal space, what I would like to sort of do is draw an analogy between what we know about how Hindu nationalism has spread in India. So the work of Tariq Tachal, but not just Tariq Tachal, many other scholars have noted the role of RSS networks and the service wings in being crucial for the spread of Hindu nationalism in poorer communities, right? So initially, Hindu nationalist organizations entered many communities purely through material exchange, through service, and only later sort of developed a partisan or political base. So similarly, the role of welfare, building a material connection between communities, has been a traditional strategy that exists within the BJP. Of course, there's a new technology. They've become more efficient at it. And the speed at which distribution is being converted into votes is quite extraordinary, right?
Yes.
But that being said, it's actually not a new strategy. It's only a strategy that has gained in effectiveness for the BJP, given the levers that it has to play. And the question about caste dignity, identity-based dignity, I think those very much still do play. But there's just a basic numbers problem, right? Every constituency you go to, there are a number of castes that are vying for the throne, so to speak, right? You can only nominate one candidate, will be from one community. So if it's purely about dignity or representation and dignity, the numbers don't work out, right? I mean, there's too much fractionalization in identity groups for that to work. It has always been about building these more complicated alliances, even beyond representation in the legislature.
Okay, Sumit, that leads me to my final question. How have the social justice parties of Tamil Nadu and really the parties in Kerala been able to stave off this challenge of the BJP's larger Hindu assimilation project?
Well, one of the reasons being that UP, you have approximately 20 to 25% upper caste population. You don't have this sort of a solid block, which the BJP can use to start its political journey or build a social coalition around. First is that. The second is that in southern states where BJP has been able to appropriate or win over a large social block, especially a backward community, they have been successful. Karnataka, for instance. Why they have been successful in Karnataka is because of their leadership within the Lingayat community, Yedurappa and other leaders,
right.
And over a period of time, the sort of polarity which has developed between the Vokaligas and the Lingayat, BJP being able to get the trust of this particular community, use it effectively, and then top it up with the larger Hindu nationalism sentiment and the upper caste vote. So they have been able to successfully execute this model in one state, at least in the south. In other states, the problem has been that they have not been able to get, first of all, the upper caste the numerical strength is much, much smaller. Secondly, they have not been able to appropriate a large backward community, OBC community. In UP also, in their first tenure, it was not just the upper caste which helped them to come to power during Kalyan Singh's regime. Kalyan Singh was a backward leader. Uma Bharti was a backward leader. These all, Sushil Modi is a backward leader. These all represented a section of the backward communities which are non-Yadav.
Right.
In the state in Tamil Nadu, where they have been able to successfully appropriate one community, they have been successful. In Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, again, they have not got any backward community, which is why they have not been able to be successful. But they are making a very strong pitch for a larger backward mobilization in Telangana, especially the way they contested the last bypoll. Itala Rajendra, who comes from a backward community, he's winning the bypoll despite after leaving the KCR government and winning it by a fair margin. And he comes from a backward community. BJP has been trying to build emulate that same sort of model in Telangana and emerge as a very credible opposition to KCR. Whether they are able to consolidate this backward vote is going to be critical in the coming days, and may help them even to come to power if they are successfully able to emulate this Karnataka model in Telangana. But in Tamil Nadu and in Andhra Pradesh and in Kerala, they have not been able to get the support of this sort of a large vote chunk. You need this 10 to 15% vote to build a successful electoral coalition, which has been missing.
Well, it's always an education talking to you, Sumit.
Thanks.
Professor Nilanjan Sarkar, thanks so much to you two for your analysis and for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Smith.